Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 189 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the final episode, the series finale of the animated series from Lucasfilm called Star Wars: The Bad Batch, which just debuted this week on Disney Plus. And for that conversation, I have invited back on the show my friend and fellow Laughing Place correspondent, Jeremiah Good. Jeremiah, thank you for coming back on the show. How are you? Are you ready to talk about some Star Wars?
I am, Mike. I feel like I do this once a year, and it's usually the exact same time, which I have no problem with because I love it. But I also feel like we never get enough time to just sit and talk Star Wars. So this works out great.
There we go. It works out perfect. So I just saw you not very long ago, less than a week ago. We hung out a bit at the parks. We went to something that we're going to talk about in the Star Wars headlines segment in a little bit. But how was your trip to California otherwise? What did you get up to during your visit?
What didn't I get up to, I think, is the best bet. I was out there for family reasons, but then I had a chance to preview the Universal Studios Hollywood 60th anniversary tram ride, which was really fun. I'm an old school Universal employee and fan, so getting to do that was one of those things. The trip was great, but that benefit was there. I also got to see Season of the Force out there. That's one of those things that when it was announced, I was a little bit like, I don't know if I'll get to see that. And then when I made it out there, and it's subtle, but it was lots of fun. I enjoyed it. And then, of course, Pixar Fest with you guys, you and Tony, which was a lot of fun. But I feel like for somebody who wasn't there for it, I was right there in the trenches with you guys a lot.
You really were. You contributed a lot, especially with the Pizza Planet truck hunt, which I think we didn't know it was going to be as cool as it was, or as exhaustive as it was. So I found some of them. I found a handful of them, but you really did the bulk of the work tracking those down. And if people aren't aware, you can find our list of 48 of the 50 that are out there. Was still missing 2. But Jeremiah, what was that like for you looking for those in the parks?
So the first day I was out there, which was a couple of days before Pixar Fest started, I walked into Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout and walked into one of the collectors' rooms. And all of a sudden I look over and I see the Pizza Planet truck. And I'd heard something about this, like it hadn't been announced, but I heard rumblings. And that truck, it's the Pizza Planet popcorn bucket, but it was done up in a style. It was a tribute to Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. It had the E=MC² on there, the lightning bolt. I asked the cast member, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going to have 50 of these throughout the resort." In my head, okay, great. I won't even bother with that. And then, just like you and how you said Tori would have loved doing that, I definitely would have. I went from I'm not interested to I stayed in the park until almost 1 o'clock on that last night after we went and did something to try to find the last 2 that I could. And definitely go look at the coverage, look at the photos. I've been told by people that I had to know exactly where they were because of the pictures I took. I had ideas of where some of them were from talking to cast members, but there were some that I turned my head at the right time and just caught it out of the corner of my eye. And to tie it back to us, Star Tours has a really cool one that's kind of I call it a Wall-E cousin. And then, of course, there's one in Galaxy's Edge and one out at the Star Wars Trading Post. So those were all really fun to find. Much more fun than the scavenger hunt that goes with Season of the Force.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the one by Downtown Disney's Star Wars Trading Post has little Grogu driving the Pizza Planet truck. So I appreciated that detail. We are recording this episode via the Laughing Place YouTube channel live. If you happen to be watching along, please comment along like Todd Stone did here, asking you, Jeremiah, did they bring back the collapsing bridge for the anniversary tour? He's referring to Universal Studios Hollywood. So what's the answer?
No. So one of the publicity information that went out was the collapsing bridge and the runaway train were going to be back. They refer to the collapsing bridge because it's still right there by Kong. And to just kind of do a 2-for-1, the runaway train that has been on the collapsing bridge for about a year now shoots smoke out the smokestack. So those two classic attractions are there, not doing anything that they originally did, but they're still there.
I know you're a Quantum Leap fan, and every time we watch that old series, you always see the collapsing bridge shows up whenever Sam Beckett is running around in the wilderness. It's just like just shooting it on the back lot there.
Oh yeah, the Quantum Leap in the back lot was amazing. Which to tangent, I'm sad that Quantum Leap, the reboot, didn't get picked up for a third season. That was something I was really starting to enjoy, and it was getting its wheels under it, but hopefully sometime other.
And then Stephen Rocky Singleton says, hello, everyone from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Hello, Stephen. Let's get into something called the 5 Star Wars questions. Jeremiah, like you said earlier, you have appeared at least once a season for every season of Who's the Bossk, and that means you're up to the 5th and final level of the 5 Star Wars questions. Are you ready for these?
Let's do it.
Okay, number 1, the 5 Star Wars questions, level 5. What is your favorite Star Wars movie poster?
See, this one was one of those hard ones. I'm going to say the easiest one that's kind of a cheat. The Revenge of the Jedi poster was, I saw it once when I was a kid. It appeared, but that was one that I loved. But if I had to go with the best, I mean, we're talking the original. There's nothing better than, the original Star Wars poster by Tom Jung that just, it captured every bit of the imagination. And, I definitely don't remember seeing that when I was a kid because I was 2. But that, to this day, I think that's one of the most iconic posters. I mean, you look at everybody from Family Guy and Simpsons has done a takeoff on that. So it's still just so classic.
For the Revenge of the Sith poster, I had a boss when I worked at a movie theater. My boss collected movie posters, and he had for decades and decades. And he had a Revenge of the Sith one sheet, and I got to stand up next
Revenge
to
of
it.
the Jedi.
Revenge of the Jedi. Yes, thank you for correcting.
I was like, did I say Sith or Jedi?
No, sorry. Revenge of the Jedi. Yes, and I was just so jealous it was cool to get to see it up close and personal. But yeah, that's a real holy grail of many Star Wars collectors. Number 2, what is your favorite Star Wars fight scene or action sequence?
That's easy. Episode 1. When Jar Jar is fighting the frog and he's Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. Everything about that scene is so iconic. The music alone, yes, even though that was the ultimate spoiler for any movie ever made, thanks to the CD track, but I think that one is probably up there. I mean, if we're looking at more of just a major battle scene, Hoth versus the AT-ATs, AT-ATs.
Now, I am going to get to see the duel between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul tomorrow in the theater when I go see The Phantom Menace. Do you have plans to check that movie out on its re-release for the 25th anniversary?
I probably will see it. It's, it doesn't hold that special a place for me because I was around for that. I did go see it at the Chinese. I did sleep overnight. It was amazing. But out of all the films, I mean, that still ranks up there as one of my least favorite for 3/4 of the film. But yes, I will definitely try to see it because how often do we get to really see Star Wars on the big screen?
Fair enough. All right, number 3. What is the coolest, in your opinion, what is the coolest on-screen Star Wars costume? And As always, I'm going to ask you to be specific here. Don't just say Han Solo. Say Han Solo in his Bespin outfit, or you know what I'm talking about. Be specific.
Wow, just totally steal my thunder
No.
there. No, I think Han Solo Episode 4, A New
Okay.
Hope, like just classic cowboy with the blaster strapped to his hip, the vest, everything. And that was one that I was doing a lot of thinking about. I was like, wow, there's so many great costumes, so many, we could talk about the different aliens, we could talk about everything. I mean, in the opening scroll that you did, there's so many different ones that I was like, oh yeah, that, Ahsoka, Hera's great. But yeah, Han is just, I think it's because that's the one that we could all actually wear. Like everything else is always outside of our budget, but we could easily recreate that one.
We're not necessarily going to look as good as Harrison Ford does in it, but we can at least try it on. Number 4, this is most of these are positive, but this one is the negative one of all the 5 Star Wars questions. If you had the power to erase one piece of Star Wars media or one element of the Star Wars franchise entirely from existence, what would it be?
I want to know if anybody's told you this answer before or not. The original Clone Wars movie, the animated one.
The theatrical one.
Yes, the one that is just horrible, and they've ignored it at every cost, except for it's the only, other than the final season, Clone Wars, that's the only thing that's on Disney Plus. But that was one that it was just, I don't know if it was just fell outside of my range or if I just had no interest in it because of the animated style, but I never saw it in the theaters. And then when I finally sat down and watched, it's like,
yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I skipped it in the theater. That was during the period in my life where I wasn't as devoted to Star Wars as I was earlier or now. And yeah, when I saw it later on, I was underwhelmed by it. Obviously, the Clone Wars animated series gets better as it goes along, but did not start off great with that theatrical movie. So maybe that should have been relegated to being, the 4 TV episodes that it was supposed to be originally, and then they turned it into that film. So number 5, the 5th and final of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 5. What do you personally want to see happen with Star Wars in the future as we look ahead toward where this franchise might end up in the next decade or so?
This one is impossible to answer because, and this is something that I've been trying to push as something that's normal in every Star Wars speak. The Filoni-verse of Star Wars really, every time we think, oh, we know what's happening, it changes it up so well. We went into Ahsoka expecting more Ahsoka, less Rebels. Right. I love Rebels. I want to see, that storyline with Ezra and Thrawn and everything. That's the sequence that, I'd love to see more of the focus on that. The Rey film, I hope that we get some good ties to some of the past. Seeing some of the young Jedis, maybe we'll see Omega start to pop up at some point. I don't want to jump ahead too far.
Right.
But, that was that. All of that.
Well, we had this period over the last 5 years where Star Wars became more about the TV shows. And now, at least from what we've heard, they are kind of steering back toward theatrical movie-going experience. Are you happy about that, or would you prefer it stick around on TV?
As long as it is good quality, and I don't have any worry at this point. I think, again, just like with some of the Disney stuff, they went through the ups and downs. They kind of fixed the course, and now we're kind of moving ahead in the right direction.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the Rey feature film could be something that may not be what we want, but I think after the kind of blowback of the sequels, we'll probably start to see something more along the, not fan service, but something that's a little bit more Star Wars-y that we all like.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I'm excited for whatever comes from Star Wars in the future. At the very least, I always try to go in with an open mind and cautious optimism.
Yeah.
But let's get into some Star Wars headlines for this week. And I want to start off with the thing we kind of teased earlier, which was this experience that we got to have together last Friday evening. We took an Uber over from Disneyland Resort to Angel Stadium there in Anaheim. It was Star Wars weekend, which was 2 nights. It was Friday and Saturday night. If you went Saturday night, you got a little, what was it called? Mandalorian rally monkey,
Yep.
right? Yeah. But Friday night, the special treat for the fans in attendance was a Star Wars drone show with 800 drones, and the lights on the drones would form all these, it basically told the story of the original Star Wars film, A New Hope. Jeremiah, what were you expecting going into that? And what were your thoughts coming out of it?
I've seen I've seen drone shows, from the amazing drone shows that we have on our YouTube channel in Paris to the hey, here we're doing a drone show to break a world record that they did at IAAPA last year at the Orange County Convention Center here in Orlando. That was kind of like we're just doing stuff to do stuff. I didn't expect it to be as cool as it really was.
Yeah.
And, you and I think we kind of rank up there as the least sports-oriented people on the team.
Yeah.
But going to that, the game was enjoyable. It was the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim versus the Minnesota Twins and their spicy sausage rally that they've had. If you don't know about that, go look it up. It's worth it. But that show was, I think you and I both walked out of there with our mouths wide open still.
Yeah, I actually had never really seen a drone show like that. I keep missing them. So they have done one at Universal Hollywood for Harry Potter. I think it was the wintertime night lights at Hogwarts Castle, but every time I've seen it, the winds have been too bad for the drones. So I've just, for whatever reason, I've missed these drone shows. This is really my first one, and I was very impressed, especially when the object they're creating in the sky is like 3-dimensional and it kind of rotates. That's a very effective effect that they can do with those drones. So yeah, you can watch a full video of that drone light show from Angel Stadium on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. I think we had a good time with it. It was certainly a unique treat, something that you don't get to see terribly often. And I saw a lot of comments of people kind of hoping that something like that would come to Disneyland. I don't know if they have the ability, because of the space that they have. You kind of need a big open space underneath the drones, if I'm understanding it right.
Yeah,
right?
It needs a space not only to lift off, but it has to be cleared of humans.
Yeah.
And then it can't go over humans. So Disneyland is definitely one of the challenges. To kind of cross the road here, they just announced that Universal is going to be doing something with 800 drones this summer. So that's going to be an exciting thing. You'll have to come out and to see that here. But
and there's something coming to Disney Springs, right?
Yes, May 24th. There's a drone show that we don't know a lot about, but that's going to be one of those ones that, hopefully this is the next trend. As much as we love fireworks, drones can do a lot more than just fireworks.
Very cool. Looking forward to more on that. So I got to see advanced screeners of this new series of animated shorts called Star Wars Tales of the Empire. I watched all 6. I wrote a mostly spoiler-free review that's up right now on laughingplace.com. And I don't want to spoil anything here because it doesn't come out till Saturday, May the 4th. But I will say that I really enjoyed them. I really love this concept that you can take these characters that wouldn't necessarily be featured in a movie or in their own, long form TV show or anything like that, but you can give them these little shorts and fill in the gaps in their narrative stories from the Star Wars universe, and kind of shine a spotlight on these supporting characters that wouldn't otherwise get this much attention. And this series focuses on Morgan Elsbeth from The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, and Barriss Offee, who was in Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated series. I preferred the Morgan Elsbeth segments, but I also thought the Barris Offee parts were interesting as well. And yeah, just without spoiling anything, I thought it was really good. Jeremiah, are you looking forward to this? Is this something you're going to check out?
Absolutely. Tales of the Jedi was one of
Yeah,
those surprising things when that popped up. To me, it was like, oh, okay, it's, just one more thing to digest out of the Star Wars universe. But then I felt, just like you said, it's taking the characters that we know a little bit about
yeah,
and expanding their story, not even a long form version of it, but just giving us enough background where we care more about it
right.
than, oh, there's that character walking through the background. So yeah, that'll be something on Saturday that I'll definitely be waking up for. Not at 3 a.m. my time, but I'll wake up and watch it.
And of course, next week, I think late next week, I will do an episode with a guest talking about Tales of the Empire in depth once people have had a chance to watch it, and we can discuss it. So, in video game news, there is this mobile game, Star Wars Hunters. This has been in development for a long time. It kept getting delayed, and there were previews of this game and demos of this game at conventions for years, and now it's finally getting released on June 4th. We actually have a date for this game, and there's a new trailer that you can watch. We have it on laughingplace.com. It's also on YouTube. I don't know a tremendous amount about this style of game. I haven't played this type of multiplayer game before, but it looks like a lot of fun. I really like the character designs that, there's like a droid who thinks he's a Jedi that I thought was a really fun idea. There's one character that's just like two Jawas stacked on top of each other. So they got very creative with the character designs. Otherwise, I think I'll probably try it out. I think it's on Nintendo Switch as well, in addition to your mobile platforms. Jeremiah, is this on your radar at all? Is something that you want to try?
It's when you started talking about it, I was like, I don't remember this. Then I remembered this from, I want to say, pre-pandemic, seeing it
It's
at
been, yeah,
San Diego Comic-Con at one point. It's one of those, I am up for anything Star Wars. If I can find a good video game, I dive into it head first. I always fear playing games like this where there's going to be some 8-year-old kid that's just going to whomp me
right.
every time I play it, but I'll definitely give it a try like you will.
Yeah, that's my hesitation as well. I don't tend to go for the multiplayer online games because I just don't want to play with anyone I don't know. If it were my friends or whatever, maybe, but I just have a fear of, like you said, getting in there with some teenager yelling at me because I'm not doing well enough. But single players are more my speed, single player games. We've got Star Wars Celebration coming up less than a year away in Japan, 2025, April 2025. I will be there. I will say right now that I will see you if you're going to Star Wars Celebration Japan 2025. Now, Jeremiah, you've been to Japan before, so I've never been.
Yeah.
Very excited to be there for the convention, obviously, but also to check out the Disney parks. I'm sure you can recommend those, right?
Yeah.
But we did get our first announcements of celebrity guests.
They're big surprises too.
Yeah.
Never would have expected these guys there.
Yeah, I think Kyle, our coworker Kyle, always jokes whenever Celebration rolls around. He's always like, well, "Let me guess who it is."
Yeah.
So Anthony Daniels is one of the obvious guesses. He has played C-3PO since the original Star Wars film. He will be there. Tamura Morrison, who is Jango Fett in the prequel trilogy. He also played Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett and some of the clone troopers in the Revenge of the Sith film. He's going to be there. Now, this next person has not, according to the press release, he has not done a signing before at Star Wars Celebration, but he has been there, obviously. Doug Chiang, who is the lead designer on everything basically from the prequels onward. He's been around at Lucasfilm steering the design side of the company. And then your pal Ashley Eckstein will be there. Now, Jeremiah, I know you didn't make it to Celebration in London. Have you gone to a Celebration before?
I went to the one here, and then did I go to one in California? I've been to the one here. have we had 2 here since I moved out here? I know I've been to 2 celebrations, and celebration for me is always, it's much like the D23 Expo and Comic-Con, where you need to be in the room for that moment. And if you're not in the room for that moment, it's really kind of okay, you're just walking around looking at cosplayers.
Right.
But no, celebration to me has always been fun because it's one of my first nerdums. Like Star Wars has always been in my life, and being around some of the great people that are diehards for it.
Yes.
I mean, my housemate and I became best friends while sleeping on the floor at the Orange County Convention Center for the first Star Wars celebration I went to like 10 years ago out here. And it's just, the community is always so great. And it's nonstop, and that's where we will hear about whatever the next steps are. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to be there. I don't have a definite way there, but if I happen to be there, I'll be more than happy to be there. One, because the Japanese fans are amazing, and two, I can only imagine how well organized this will be as opposed to everything I heard about London Celebration.
Well, I'm very excited for it and excited to see all these guests there. And this is, like we said, this is really just the first round of celebrity guests that have been announced. I'm sure there will be many, many more on the way as the weeks and months go by leading up to April of next year. Comic books this week, there was only one, and it was related to something we talked about earlier, the Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace anniversary special. I thought this was interesting. I already read it. I wrote a review on laughingplace.com. It is the story of the Phantom Menace, but the perspective is shifted a little slightly to focus almost entirely on Anakin. As you know, we don't really meet Anakin until like a third of the way through the movie, but this is basically everything told from Anakin's perspective, which, I've heard critiques of that movie that it kind of needed more of a focus on a single protagonist, and maybe that was the way to do that. But I thought it was an interesting take. You get a little bit more insight into what's going on through little young 9-year-old Anakin's head during those events. So I would recommend it, going out and checking out this comic book. The only criticism I had of it is they repeated too many scenes from the film that we already know by heart. They didn't really need to do that. Like, they could have just had the new scenes that we could have figured out where they belonged, but they basically alternated, like, new scene from the movie and vice versa, on and on that way. But definitely recommend. This was written by Greg Pak, who writes the Star Wars Darth Vader comic book, and it's out there available now. Let's see. Star Wars Andor Season 1 and Obi-Wan Kenobi, the limited series, are now available on 4K disc. If you have a 4K player like a PlayStation 5, you can go and get those really nice high resolution discs to watch those series, Disney Plus series, that are now available on physical media. And you can read the reviews written by our pal and fellow Laughing Place contributor, Alex Reif. Those are up on Laughing Place right now. I'm waiting for mine to arrive. I pre-ordered them from Amazon, but they have not showed up yet. So hopefully any day those will be here. Speaking of, well, we haven't really talked much about May the 4th, which is coming up in just a couple days. But tomorrow, May 3rd, Hasbro, the toy company, is going to be making some announcements in the morning. I'll be covering that. They were going to be making an announcement about a new Star Wars HasLab project. If you'll recall, in the past, they've done the Jabba's sail barge. They've done the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian. Right now, people are waiting to get their Ghost, the Ghost ship from Star Wars Rebels. There's supposed to be another, these are large-scale vintage collection, 3 3/4-inch scale ships or play sets coming from HasLab. There was supposed to be an announcement about a new one of these, and they've delayed it away from May the 4th for whatever reason. They weren't ready to announce it. So don't expect that coming from the news tomorrow morning, but at some point soon, they said they will be making that announcement. And we will get news about other toys during their live stream tomorrow morning. There's more May the 4th merchandise available from Walmart, Disney Store, and other retailers. All that information. Oh, yeah. You want to plug Roosevelt's there, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I mean, Roosevelt's just today, May 2nd, did a major drop of, I don't even remember how many shirts they did. And there are some really nice ones. I'm sure by the time some of you are listening to this or watching it on YouTube, they won't be available. But there has been news that tomorrow, May 3rd, they're going to do more Star Wars shirts. And they kind of said that this is going to be a weekend long, including the 4th. So we could see Star Wars shirts drop the entire time. And, Roosevelt's, as we always say, provides us with these amazing shirts to make us look better, because really we need all the help we can get.
Yeah, very, very generous of them to hook us up with some of these amazing shirts to show off, because we get to go to all these cool events in the theme parks, and those shirts just look so good among the design of Disney parks and all these other cool
weren't
events.
you just selling them the other day at the parks?
Yeah, I wore the Star Wars Bounty Hunters one they sent me to Star Wars Night a couple weeks ago, and everywhere I turned, somebody was asking me where I got it, and I told them, oh, you just go to rsvlts.roosevelts.com and check out their selection of Star Wars shirts. So many cool designs, and more being announced as we speak, like you said, tomorrow.
Yep.
Lastly, in Star Wars headlines for this week, this is a good segue to talk about our main topic, because it's new posters that came out for Star Wars The Bad Batch series finale. We got a group shot of the Bad Batch with Omega. There's the individual character posters of a Clone X Trooper, Asajj Ventress, Rampart, Fennec Shand, these 4 kids that have been kept in that vault
that we'll be seeing the future of sometime, I'm sure.
Yeah. And then Fee Genoa also got her own poster. That's the Wanda Sykes character. And you can check those all out on StarWars.com. We also have them at laughingplace.com. And that's a great transition to get into our main topic for today, which is the Bad Batch series finale. The title of this episode is The Cavalry Has Arrived, or as a commenter, Austin Henry, said, the Bad Arrived. Yeah, so the Cavalry is the Bad Batch, and they have arrived. But before we get into that, let's ask Jeremiah. So you were on the show last spring, as you said. We were talking about the Bad Batch, and I wanted to ask you, how has your relationship with this show evolved since you were on the show last year? So there's been a full season of these episodes. Yeah. How do you feel about it now compared to where we were in 2023?
The only thing I really remember about the last time we talked about this was me complaining about Omega. Her voice nonstop. It was just like, if I have to listen to her talk anymore, it definitely grew on me this season. It's amazing how we can become so emotionally attached to drawings on a screen. And this season did that. Like, this show, it's amazing how this show, which when it started, we all kind of were like, what is this? They appeared in Clone Wars for 2 seconds at the end. Right. It wasn't something that I ever expected to actually be so involved in. And I know Mac may get upset at me for this one, but I had to watch this on the big screen where X-Men 97 I could just watch, so I didn't have to worry about spoilers. But I waited to watch last week's episode till I got home from California on my big screen TV. And just like with this episode, I had to watch it on the big screen, lights out, sound full blast. And it's become such a good show. And it's always like that. It's a great show and we love it. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way you do, because we were talking about the Clone Wars earlier, and I never quite felt that attachment to that show. And there are parts of that series that I really enjoyed, but the Bad Batch, I do feel like we got more invested, or at least I got more invested in these characters as the seasons have gone by. And yeah, a little sad now to say goodbye this week, unfortunately. But the series finale is called The Cavalry Has Arrived. It was directed by, it had 3 directors actually. Stuart Lee, Saul Ruiz, and Brad Rao all directed this double-length episode. It was written by Jennifer Corbett, who I believe is also the showrunner, and the story editor was Matt Michnovitz, who has done that role for all the episodes this season. What did you think of the finale overall coming out of this episode, Jeremiah?
So let me start off by turning on Disney Plus yesterday, and the screen pops up, and it just has Omega with a look on her face like everybody is dead, and that was the splash screen. I was like, "Don't do this! Don't do this!" At one point during the episode, I almost felt like they were gonna, like, as everybody's running in, Omega's running out, and then thankfully it all tied together. This was such a satisfying episode. I want to say that this is probably the most satisfying of any Star Wars TV or movie, because it had an ending. It was, yes, there's still some space for future stories out of it.
Yeah.
But it had an ending, and it wasn't sad. Spoilers. It was a really good ending. All of our characters that we care about made it through. Too many spoilers, but yes, I really loved this episode.
I will say my first thought was that I felt like I hadn't been surprised enough by it. Like I felt like it was a little too predictable, but at the same time, so many of the things that I had predicted did not happen. Mm-hmm. So it was surprising in how unsurprising it was.
Yeah.
I guess, if that makes sense. Like you, I kind of thought somebody has to die. Somebody really, I mean, well, let's just say right now, we're going to talk about spoilers. We just have to. So among the characters that I would call good guys, or, protagonists, we really only lost Nala Se, right? The Kaminoan scientist. Pretty much everyone else gets out alive, right? I'm not
and she had a very noble death. She blew up everything that she had ever worked for.
Well, let's talk about that scene, actually, because this is the big moment that really stood out to me. That scene between it is Rampart, who has turned traitor again, and he's holding Nala Se at blaster point in the lab, and he's basically stealing all the information on this cloning technology, and he's gonna sell it back to the Empire because he knows how valuable it is to Emperor Palpatine. And Nala Se has this great speech that really resonated with me, where she says, well, this technology, the cloning technology, never belonged to the Empire. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to the Empire. It always will be Kaminoan. And I just thought, oh, this is a great lesson that no one will learn about why you need to treat your employees well, basically, because she had the know-how basically to do what they wanted to do, but because she was so mistreated, and I guess she kind of knew none of this was going to be used for good, she ended up sabotaging the whole thing. And we know from The Rise of Skywalker later on that they never really mastered the whole cloning idea of making this new body for Emperor Palpatine. We see him in The Rise of Skywalker, and his fingers are falling apart, and they just he needs to, what he's trying to take Rey's body at the end of that movie, because his clones are never where they want him to be. So really it's Nala Se who causes that domino effect of Project Necromancer never quite comes to its fruition the way they wanted to. But I don't know, what did you think of that scene and that speech? Did that resonate with you the way it did for me?
I didn't quite see it as the treat your employees better, but yeah, you said that, I completely agree. No, it was such, again, a cartoon makes us
Right.
feel that way. And it was so well done. Even the setup of Rampart, like you could kind of pick up that, oh, he's gonna turn again,
Yeah.
and running in, and that entire interaction and the speech was just perfect. Um, I want to see how some of the cloning information still makes it from them
Right.
into everything, but no, the explosion, it was all very well done.
Yeah, that the very moment of his death is just so rewarding, like,
Yeah.
because he has that you see that expression on his face, and he starts talking, but his dialogue is immediately interrupted by the explosion, and it's just a perfect ending for that villain.
Hmm.
I do want to talk about other things that I predicted that didn't happen. In fact, I predicted right here on this show that one of the clone X troopers would be revealed to be Tech,
I thought that also.
having been like brainwashed to go up against his old friends in the Bad Batch. And I will say that I am so glad that that did not happen. What did you think about? So you said you had the same
Oh
theory,
yeah, I
but were you
totally.
relieved that it didn't turn out that way?
I was, and when they all started coming out of the pods,
Yeah,
and they're all like, "Hey, we're really, we're gonna kick some butt right now." I was like, "Okay, there's gonna be one point where they're gonna look in Tech, and it's just gonna like that trigger of like, wait," and then he's gonna turn and help. But no, I really enjoyed it, and that ties in with the final scene of Omega and
yeah,
Tech's glasses still on the
right.
dashboard, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm just so thankful that Tech's death in season 2 actually stuck and it actually meant something to these characters and they didn't reverse it. I'm so thankful for that. There was that moment where Dr. Hemlock is talking to Hunter after they've captured them and he's got them in that little pod.
Mhm.
And Hemlock starts talking about Tech. He says, like, oh, last time we interacted, you had just lost
Yeah.
your squad mate. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is the big reveal where somebody, the guy's going to take off his helmet and it's going to be Tech underneath. But no, they did not go that way. And yeah, the moment you're talking about where he's activating all those other clones, because somebody had predicted on the show a week or two ago that all these clones were like replicas of the Bad Batch or like evil versions of the Bad Batch.
Mhm.
And that's also what I thought they were going to do there, but they didn't do that either. So they didn't fall into any of those traps. I was very happy about that. But how did you feel about the ultimate fate of pretty much everybody else? The heroes, where they ended up at the end of this episode?
I was very happy. Like I said, there isn't a Star Wars product that I can
Yeah,
remember that's ever had a, hey, they just flew off to the sunset. Everything's fine. They're on the island. They're old. And then
right.
Omega's a teenager,
Yeah,
early 20s, however it worked out. And she's going to go, fight with the rebellion. I was like, this is such a great ending.
yeah,
Um, I was expecting even possibly a post credit. That would have been the best post credit, I feel, but something post credit into wherever she ended up. But I'm
yeah,
glad that they didn't. I'm glad that there's a future story somewhere down the line.
right.
But the Bad Batch all worked out well. The villains, the deaths were I don't want to say perfect because they're deaths, but it was every story, every character had a good wrap up in this episode, I feel.
Yeah, I was thinking at the end that if any characters deserve a little bit of peace in the Star Wars galaxy, it's the clones because there's a line in this episode about how they never really got to have a childhood, which is so accurate because they're birthed out of these pods and then their aging is accelerated and then they're immediately trained to become soldiers and they fought in the Clone Wars and then basically they're abandoned by the Empire after that and they had to go through this whole ordeal. So now at least the clones that are left, like Hunter says at the end, they can choose their own fates. And we know some of them end up where we saw them in Star Wars Rebels, but the ones that choose to stay on Pabu have this relatively peaceful life. I kind of want to ask you though, why do you think the Empire? So the Empire knows that Pabu exists. They know that the Bad Batch was using it as like a hideout. Why do you think they left them alone for all that time?
I don't know if they well, when we say they, the Empire is, much like the US government. There are so
Yeah,
many aspects. Who knows,
right.
really knows what. But I think it's just kind of got to the point where they're like, yeah, we're not even going to bother with the clones. I mean, you look at Captain Rex and everybody that went on for, Rebels, Ahsoka,
Yeah,
everything. So I think they just wrote off the clones. They're like, okay, we're done with this. We're going to move on to our volunteers, and then our volunteer kids for the new stormtroopers and first
yeah.
order troopers. So I think that they just felt that they were obsolete and not worth their time, because if they weren't causing waves anymore, there's no reason for them to even bother.
Right. Yeah. The more I thought about this question that I had was the answer was, oh, the Empire just doesn't care. Like
Yeah.
the people who really cared are dead. And, you know, Grand Moff Tarkin or Governor Tarkin shows up at the end and he shuts down Mount Tantus, the cloning facility. He's like, divert all the funds that was going to cloning over to the Death Star, basically. That's going to be
And I
our
love
push.
that.
Yeah.
We've never heard anything about funds, how much it
Right.
cost, but
Yeah.
this, and did we hear in Andor there was some funds talk?
Well, there was that big heist where they stole like all the Imperial payroll.
Yeah, it's like that's so random. They're just now throwing stuff in, but yeah, I did enjoy that. Like that was the placemaking of, okay, we're done with the cloning. Now we're going to build the ultimate weapon.
Right. What did you think about the action scenes? Really, what we should talk about some of the action in this episode, because it was action heavy, especially in the second half.
Mhm.
But in the first half, we got the big escape of the Zillo beast breaking out of the facility, which kind of allows the Bad Batch to enter to follow through on their plan. But then, of course, there's a big battle sequence between Clone Force 99 and the Clone X troopers. And then you have that kind of very tense standoff between the Bad Batch, or at least it's just like Hunter and Crosshair, I think. By the way, I think the second time I watched this episode, I realized that Crosshair had his hand chopped off. Did you pick up on that?
They never showed that his hand was chopped off.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because that was one of the times where I was like, did they do that? And it was definitely implied, but it
Yeah.
could have also just been him chopping the gun in half. But
Okay.
I do believe it was his hand got chopped
Yeah,
off.
because every shot of him after that moment, it's like a wide shot, and you can't really like. It looks like he has a stump, but and then in that final battle, in the standoff there on that landing platform, he's using his left hand to hold the blaster, which I thought, okay, he doesn't have the right hand. I don't know. He wasn't always left-handed, right? But I don't know. What did you think of the action in these episodes?
They did a great job with everything, but the Zilla Beast stormtroopers are just idiots. Like, we're just going to keep shooting at this thing and let it stomp on us and eat us around. And no, we can stop this giant beast. That was one of those true Star Wars, like, yeah, you guys don't know what you're doing. The Bad Batch and the Clone Trooper X that was one of the coolest sequences. Something I would have liked to have seen a little bit longer and a little bit not just in the dark. And that was one of the things I was like, some of these scenes are really dark, and
Yeah.
not as far as like, mood. It's just dark to look
Right.
at. But they did, I think every sequence, I mean, in the entire run of this season, there were maybe 2 episodes that I came out of going, oh, wow, that was so good. But those 2 episodes were needed because they needed to set up everything. And they did a great job moving forward the story. This one did a little bit of everything, with moments of, when the kids are figuring out their breakout and how they're going to do it. And Omega talking to whatever the boy's name was, about how Wrecker has a fear of heights and you just have
Yeah.
to focus. And it was so classic. I also loved Omega kept saying, my brothers, my brothers.
Yeah.
And when the explosions are happening, the kids are like, what's that? And they're like, they're here.
There's also a great moment when the Bad Batch are outside trying to get into Mount Tantus, and the Zillo Beast breaks out.
I know
And
exactly what you're talking about.
there's a line where they're like, "Oh, do you think that was Echo or Omega?" And they all go Omega. That did literally make me laugh out
Yeah.
loud. I also want to pay special attention to the cast, the voice cast here, because I've said this before on the show, but D. Bradley Baker is really just, carrying so much weight on the Clone Wars, and especially here in the Bad Batch, because here the clones are really the focus. And in this episode alone, this is a 50-minute double length episode, but he voiced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different named characters plus all the other clones. So just and you can tell, again, we've said this, but you can tell the personality and you can identify the voice, even though they are all clones. They are all supposed to have the same genetic makeup. He gives each one a unique voice, a unique personality. But let's touch on Michelle Ang as well as Omega, because you said you were irritated by Omega's voice, and that has changed for you as the seasons have gone by. Or
I want to say when she first debuted, it was almost a little whiny. And then this season, I want to say she finally came into and again, I have to remember she's what, 10 to 12 maybe.
right.
So watching her age, that will definitely be part of it. But this season, I think with her confidence coming through and, her becoming really part of the Bad Batch, she's like, I was trained to do this. I know how to do that. I can do this. She started speaking more confident. I think that's really what it was. One of the things that you mentioned about D. Bradley Baker.
Yes.
If he did an Instagram post thanking, and he does all of the voices of the Bad Batch. So it's fun to go and watch that.
Right.
But yes, I think Omega, she came into her own. She did a great job. And that's going to be one of those voices that I think from now on will be recognizable in the Star Wars universe.
Absolutely. And the whole cast, everybody did a great job. I do want to highlight also Jimmy Simpson as Dr. Royce Hemlock. What a great villain. It's not often you get a super, super memorable new Star Wars villain. They like to return to Emperor Palpatine and all these villains, Darth Vader, that we've seen so many times before. But here we got a new villain for the Bad Batch, and I just thought he was great. I love him as an actor. And I was sad to see him go because I enjoyed him as a character, but also he had a great death, like you said before, falling to his demise. Let's talk about where we think it goes from here, or if it maybe doesn't go anywhere from here. Do you think this is the last we will see of these characters? Now, you kind of hinted before that maybe Omega going off to join the rebellion is leading into something else that we'll see sometime down the line. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Will these characters pop up again?
I don't think we'll see any of Clone Force 99 or the Bad Batch, because they kind of said Clone Force 99 is done.
Yeah.
that right. They're dead. But I really hope that there is something, at least Omega, in the future. And that's saying a lot for me, because I did verbally many times say how annoyed I was at Omega, but I think she's a great character. I would love to see, where she ends up. That's the nice thing about Star Wars, is there's so many.
Yeah.
We have the key moments, but they can also, just like with Clone Wars, tell stories from a fully different perspective. Let's get where she ends up. If she goes off with some secret force and helps in the long run, helps Han, helps Lando.
Well, she does say she wants to be a pilot with the Rebel Alliance, so that begs the question, where exactly, like you said, where exactly does she want to end up being a pilot? Is she working with Mon Mothma? Is Hera Syndulla around? Yeah, so there are opportunities with the comic books, with the novels for Omega to show her face again in the Rebellion or in the New Republic later on. I think it would be cool for her to pop up. Anything else that you would like to say about this series finale or Star Wars: The Bad Batch in general?
I'm just sad that it's over, and that's one of those things. When this first started, I can remember going, "Oh, this seems interesting,"
Yeah,
and it, every episode has been good. There's never been a bad episode of this,
yeah.
but there were times where I was like, "Okay, I don't really care right now," and then that turned into the exact opposite. I cared. These characters were people I wanted to know where where they're going. Watching, some of the deaths, some of the interactions between them. When Wrecker was almost dead and he's like, no, go on without me. And they did such a good job with those characters, and that I don't want to have to see them do anything more. I want to know that they are kicking back on the island with their weird face tattoos. I'm looking at you, Hunter. And they're just relaxing and enjoying life.
Yeah, you gotta love when when a show, when you're kind of on the fence about a show and it earns your respect over time,
Mhm.
like that, like this show did for us. And yeah, I said about the finale in my written review, I said it was predictable but satisfying, and that's kind of where I ended up on that. I think it's worth rewatching. I actually enjoyed it more the second time I saw it today, so I would recommend going and doing that. And yeah, I may give the full series a rewatch at some point down the line too. But glad it exists and glad to have been along for the ride for these past few years. Let's get into our final segment here on Who's the Boss. It's called First Steps into a Larger World, where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying or maybe not enjoying outside of Star Wars. And my example this week, Jeremiah's laughing already, is okay, here's the story. You like me grew up on Mystery Science Theater 3000,
Yes.
right? I love watching bad movies, and when I hear a movie is bad, it almost gets me more excited to watch it than if I hear it's good.
How
And
do
I
you feel
certainly
about that?
I certainly heard that about Madam Web, the Sony Spider-Man verse movie that came out earlier this year. But I also had not seen Morbius, the Jared Leto vampire, the living vampire who was also a Spider-Man villain. So I wanted to do a double feature of Morbius and Madam Web. I had this was on my wish list of like double features to plan for friends to come over and we would, make fun of these films together. But then I got my wife tickets to go see. Are you familiar with the podcast How Did This Get Made?
Yes.
Okay. So they're in town. They're doing shows for the Netflix Comedy Festival. Netflix is a Joke Festival, and they have a live show of How Did This Get Made. We got tickets, and we found out the movie that they're going to be talking about is Madam Web, which we were super excited to find that out. And well, we planned to watch whatever movie they announced. So we're prepared for the discussion. So we had to bump our double feature up to this past week. We sat down and we pulled the ripcord and watched both Morbius and Madam Web back to back. I can't recommend Morbius. Morbius is super, super dull. It's not really fun at all. But Madam Web, I will say, is one of those so bad it's good kind of
Oh
films, in my
no.
opinion. You're shaking your head, Jeremiah. Do you not agree?
No. I I when I went and saw Morbius I saw it early, so I
Yeah,
knew before how painful it actually was, how painful it was. And that, out of the two, that is definitely the worst
yeah.
of the two. Just there's so many bad things in Morbius, but Madam Web was one that I'm familiar with the character. I understood what the character is, And then I went and saw the movie 2 weeks after it came out, avoiding all the spoilers other than it's absolutely horrible. So I walked in, sat down, just was in so much pain watching that. And I said that I was punishing myself. It's like the rubber band on your wrist, but I had to sit there for 2 hours with the rubber band constantly
Sure.
snapping on me. So here's a question for you as somebody who just watched it.
Yes.
Did you follow that it relates to Peter Parker?
Oh yeah. No, as soon as she said Ben Parker, because
Partner.
she is EMT ambulance driver, and her partner is Adam Scott from Parks and Recreation. And she says his name is Ben Parker, and I was like, "Oh, it's Uncle Ben." So I just kind of knew from the beginning.
Not at that point, didn't even register.
Okay.
I think I was just so annoyed by that entire film, and the girls were just brats.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I want to say till I watched Pitch Meeting that it even they clarified that, oh, Peter Parker is born during this. And I even had a friend who was telling me about it before. He's like, well, there is a tie to Spider-Man. And I walked out going, what was the tie? How did I miss this?
Well, at the beginning, we were wondering why it was like a period piece, because the bulk of the movie is set in 2003. And we were like, what? Like, why did they do that? And then once I realized, oh, it's going to end with Peter Parker being born, I was like, okay, that's why they said it 20 years in the past. But yeah, there were a few hints that it was going to be Peter Parker. In fact, Tori predicted that the movie would end with them like naming the baby, because there's a couple of moments where they like almost say the baby's name and they cut it, or like something happens, somebody drops a plate and they don't say it. But they never get around to actually like naming the baby Peter Parker. So it's kind of up to you to put that together. So I guess
my favorite part about this entire thing is Madam Web, who I can't even remember the character's name anymore.
Her name is Cassandra, which Tori said is appropriate given the character from Greek mythology who was a seer of the future. So this is
can Tori stop being so smart, please?
Yeah, she's just smarter than all of us put together. But and her last name, Cassie Webb. Her last name is actually Webb. Yes.
At the end, when she's talking to Ben and he says something about being a dad, and she's like, "Oh, just wait." So she doesn't bother warning him that his son or his nephew is going to be, and his family's going to be killed, and
it just and he's going to be killed.
Yeah, all of that is just too much.
Yeah, I thought it was bad. I thought every line of dialogue was poorly written and poorly delivered in the movie, but I enjoyed it for what it was, and we had a good time with it. Your results may vary. Maybe it's better to watch it at home than in the theater like you did.
You could pause it and drink a lot.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I would recommend, if you enjoy bad movies, I would recommend Madam Web, and I would recommend listening to the How Did This Get Made episode coming up.
I will definitely be listening to that one.
We will be in the audience. I don't think we'll be on microphone at all, unless I come up with something very clever to say, but you can hear that coming up soon. So Jeremiah, do you have anything you've been watching or reading or playing lately?
Well, the best thing about being on your show at almost the exact same time for the past few years, it's always been about Star Trek. Because right now I'm mid-Discovery and it's their final season. For those of you who don't know, Discovery takes place, the ship was created during the original series time. And the technology was more advanced than what Next Gen would have been. And the captain is Spock's sister that nobody knows about, that nobody can talk about.
Okay.
And now they're 800 years in the future. I think it's probably longer than that. So it's a very interesting concept. The show started pretty interesting, but it's not the greatest. Thankfully, the spinoff of it Strange New Worlds is probably one of the best Star Trek stories ever.
Yeah.
But Discovery this season, it's their final season. And the cool thing is they are tying it together with something from Next Gen, one of the characters, and it goes back to the creation of life, essentially.
Okay.
And they're trying to find the technology that was used to create life. And it's pretty much this giant scavenger hunt of they're trying to find the clues that will point to where this piece is. So each of the clues is taking them to different planets. You see different things. They even went into the Mirrorverse, kind of into that story of the goateed Kirk and Spock.
Yes.
So they're doing a great job of bringing it all together. The casting is just so amazing. The captain, Michael Burnham, is played by Sonequa Martin, who most people know from The Walking Dead. One of my favorite characters is Anthony Rapp, who's kind of like the bones of the entire ship. Not the bones, the Scotty of the ship. He's runs the... I'm not even, yeah, well, there's a whole other...
Okay.
But Anthony Rapp, who most of you may know from really Rent is what started him, but he's been in, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. No, he was in not Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead.
Do I need to IMDb him?
The Babysitter movie with Elizabeth Shue.
Oh, Adventures in Babysitting.
Thank you. Yeah, he was in that, but he is just one of those characters that has, every time he's on screen, I want more of just him and his partner's story. And it's one
he is the kid in I see.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm putting together what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, and that's my fault. I always mix up where he was at that point. But there is so much good Star Trek. And I know it's always funny that I talk about Star Trek on the Star Wars show.
That's fine. Yeah.
But Star Trek has been more of a constant than Star Wars over the past 60 plus years. No, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
We're old. But this season is wrapping up. The series is wrapping up. So if you haven't gotten a chance, it's worth it to go get Paramount Plus. Discovery, I believe this is their 4th, maybe 5th season. Mm-hmm. And this is a standalone story from the first season to now, with a little bit of ties into Strange New Worlds, but it is strong storytelling, great characters. When you're done with Bad Batch and everything, something you should go check out.
Well, I've seen all of Strange New Worlds and really like it. Really like the cast of that. I have seen the 3rd season of Picard because that was recommended to me and enjoyed that. I have not watched any of Discovery because nobody has really recommended that I go and check it out. You're the closest that anyone has come to saying I should watch Discovery.
I think a lot of people kind of wrote off Discovery because the 2nd season was good. The 3rd season, I believe it was, really went weird. And then they're wrapping up with the solid, it's just it's a scavenger hunt storyline. Okay. And it's not too deep, but it has some good stories in it.
Cool. I'll have to add it to my list. Yeah. While I'm paying for Paramount Plus, I've just been watching Next Generation. Whenever I have a free hour, I just put that on. So maybe I got to switch over to Discovery at some point, but it is on my list to check out. So that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Bossk. A big thank you to my guest, Jeremiah Good from laughingplace.com. Jeremiah, what have you been up to lately that you want to show off or send people to go check out, either on Laughing Place or anywhere else? Where do you want to send people?
As I said, I was in California for a week and a half. Yeah. So my personal social, Jeremiah Good on really Instagram and Facebook. I don't do much on the X. There hasn't been a lot, but there's always fun stuff. I think I've been working more on just the Laughing Place stuff. You know, we got
Yeah.
up the great reel of the drones,
Yeah.
the Pixar popcorn bucket. Please go over and look at some of my pictures and just go, how did you even see that? Because
Right.
that's what I've gotten a lot of.
The
But
the one on Pirates of the Caribbean, I think, blew my mind the most because, at least in your photo, it just looks like it disappears into the background. I never would have spotted it.
and that one is, so it's in the treasure room, which I expected it.
Yeah.
So I'm going and I'm looking, and then I kind of get around to the back and I'm looking towards the doubloon case from Pirates, and then I
Yeah.
scope back, and then it is just on the hill going up to the skeleton, and it is like you said. When I posted, I just wanted to go find this,
Yeah.
and people have like, you had to know where that was. I'm like, no, and then the two other ones, the Finding Nemo submarine voyage one, I was told because I went on that twice that day looking for it. I saw, oh, it's in the sunken pirate ship in
Yeah.
a treasure chest. Okay. I'm sitting there, cameras against the portal. And then I do this and I see it off the edge and I jump in the portal next to me and
Oh,
snap the picture. And you could see, like, I was so worried that it
did you
wasn't going to be
elbow the
there.
guest next to you out of the way, or?
Thankfully, I was the last person in on that one.
Okay.
And then the hardest of them all, which is saying a lot because there are quite a few hard ones. The Little Mermaid, which is another double ride. That was the first attraction I went on Friday. And that was the thing about it being the first day of Pixar Fest. Most people had no clue what we were talking about. I'm sure you
Yes.
ran into that.
Yes.
I was told, oh yeah, Pizza Planet's over in Disneyland, or this, or the
Yep.
popcorn buckets. I'm like, no, you guys have one hidden. Oh yeah, I heard something about that. So the first time I rode Little Mermaid, I got off and they're like, no, we don't have one out. We don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they told me it hadn't been installed yet when I asked at Little Mermaid.
Yes. So when I was riding the second time, I'm, the place it should have been, the grotto where she has everything. I'm like, looking. And then as I come around the corner, I see under Prince Eric's foot in that statue, this outline of the Pizza Planet truck with the rocket on the top. And
Yeah.
I snapped this picture and I went through every filter I could to process to try to get it bigger, and nothing. But it was one of those, like, I love the fact that I was able to get it. And I've talked to people that were out there, and they flat out called me liars that we didn't know exactly where everything was. And I was like, no, at times we had good ideas. We had some hints later in the day,
Yeah.
but no, there was never it's right here. And that,
Right.
you
And
can look at
like you said, half of the cast members were helpful in giving us hints, and half had no idea whatsoever was going on. But yeah, one of my other favorites that you got a photo of that I never would have spotted in a million years was in the Indiana Jones queue, the one that was transformed into like an old transistor radio.
and so again, it's in the queue. Somebody said, oh, it's in Indy's office. Okay, that's what I would have guessed. So I walk up to the cast member who does the merge of the disability line and the regular line. I'm like, can I go look in Indy's office? We hear there's a Pizza Planet truck in there. And he thankfully had heard something about this, but had no clue. You and I have both looked in there for multiple minutes anyway, just because it's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm looking up on the shelves, looking around. And I will say, the first time I looked in there, I noticed that radio, and I was like, that seems new to me.
Right.
But never would have even thought of it. And then all of a sudden I stop. And then again, you kind of notice the rocket on the top, and then you start making the outline and how it's built into the radio. 5 minutes I was sitting there looking for that through everything in the office, even though, I would have done that anyway. But yeah, that was one of those ones that the Imagineers who put this stuff together, you can look at some of them, like, to point out the one that's almost the most painful is the train in the train station at Disneyland. Like, it's beautifully done and it looks like it's a old wood model, but then you look at it as, is it supposed to look that bad, or is it supposed to be? But yeah, some of them were really well done.
And the
The
one in
one,
the tree house that looks like an accordion.
yes,
It's just like, the amount of thought that went into this was so impressive.
for a thing that they aren't even promoting, like
Right.
we are
It's up to us. Yeah, it's up
yeah.
to us to promote that.
I
And if you don't, yeah,
go
if you
ahead.
don't know what we're talking about, go and look at the photo report on laughingplace.com. We still need 2 of the 50. We've got 48, but hopefully when I go back on Saturday for May the 4th, I'll be able to track down those last 2 Pizza Planet trucks. Who knows? That's gonna wrap up this episode of Who's the Boss. Next episode, special May the 4th episode coming on Saturday. It's episode 190, a Mike and David movie club, and it's a really fun one. We've already recorded it. It is a double feature of 2 Star Wars ripoff movies from the early 1980s, from Roger Corman, and it was just a really fun episode to watch the movies and then record with my friend David. So check that out on Saturday, and then next week we'll be talking about Tales of the Empire and all the Star Wars happenings at Disneyland Resort. My name is Mike Celestino. You can find me at laughingplace.com. All of our activities over there, all the Disney news and opinions you could ever want. I'm on Instagram as well at Who's the Bossk Pod. Jeremiah, thank you so much again, and see you real soon. Thanks for listening and or watching here live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. See you real soon. Bye.